The crash in the snow. The night was cold. Snow covered the trees, the road, and the roof of the small wooden cabin. Jake walked alone through the forest, carrying firewood in both hands. He liked this quiet life, far away from the noise of the city. There were no neighbors, no cars, and no people. Just him, the trees, and the cold air. Suddenly the sky lit up. A bright light like a falling star rushed across the dark sky. It was huge and fast. It wasn't normal. A loud boom followed and the ground shook. Jake dropped the firewood and looked up. A silver object, burning and spinning, crashed into the forest nearby. Jake didn't think twice. He ran toward the crash, heart pounding. Snow made his steps slow, but he kept going. Trees were broken and the air smelled like smoke and metal. Then he saw it. A strange ship had crashed between the trees. It was big and smooth, made of shiny metal and shaped like nothing he had seen before. Parts of it were broken, and sparks flew from its side. Steam rose from the cracks. It looked like something from another world. Jake walked closer, careful with every step. The ship had a door, half open, hanging off its hinges. He stepped inside and looked around. The walls were glowing faint blue. Lights blinked. Everything was broken. And then he saw her. A woman was lying on the floor. But she wasn't human. Her skin was light blue. Her long silver hair covered part of her face. Her clothes were torn. There was blood on her head. She wasn't moving, but her chest rose and fell slowly. She was alive, but only just. Jake moved quickly. He knelt beside her and checked her breath. It was weak. He didn't understand what she was, but he couldn't leave her there. Carefully, he picked her up. She was cold and light, almost too light. Her skin felt like snow. Her face looked peaceful, even with the blood. He carried her back through the snow. The wind blew hard. Snowflakes hit his face, but he didn't stop. Step by step, he made his way to the cabin, holding her close to keep her warm. It felt like a dream, like something from a story. When he reached the cabin, he pushed the door open and went inside. The fire in the corner had almost gone out. He laid her gently on the bed and covered her with blankets. Then he added more wood to the fire, trying to make the room warm. She didn't wake up. Jake found a clean cloth and warm water. He cleaned the blood from her head. Her skin had strange marks, thin glowing lines like they were drawn under the surface. They moved slowly, like waves in water. He had never seen anything like it. He watched her for hours. She didn't move. She didn't speak. But her chest still moved with every breath. The night passed slowly. In the morning, she opened her eyes. Jake was sitting in the chair beside the bed. He had not slept. He looked at her, and she looked at him. Her eyes were silver, not gray, silver like melted metal. She stared at him without blinking. She tried to speak, but only a soft sound came out. Her lips moved, but the words were not English. Jake raised his hands and spoke softly. "It's okay. You're safe." She looked around the room, confused and weak. She tried to sit up, but her body shook. Jake helped her sit, placing pillows behind her. She kept watching him like he was a stranger from a different world. Jake brought her a bowl of warm soup, but she didn't eat. She just held the bowl in her hands and looked at it like she didn't know what it was. Later, she pointed to the window. Jake walked over and looked outside. The snow had stopped falling. The forest was still and quiet. But far in the distance, he saw something strange, small black shapes in the sky, moving slowly, watching, hovering. They were not birds. He turned to look at the woman. She was staring at him. Her face was pale and her lips moved again. A single word came out. It was not clear, but the fear in her voice was, someone was coming, and they were not friendly. The silent stranger. The next few days passed in silence. The alien woman remained in Jake's cabin, resting and watching. She still didn't speak much. Her voice was soft, broken, and strange. She tried to say some words, but they didn't sound human. Jake didn't understand her and she didn't understand him. But still, something started to grow between them, a kind of quiet understanding. Each day she grew a little stronger. She moved slowly at first, touching things carefully like everything was new to her. She followed Jake with her eyes, always alert, always cautious. Sometimes she would stand near the fire and hold out her hands to feel the warmth, staring into the flames as if remembering something from long ago. Jake noticed the small changes. She began to copy his actions, holding a spoon, drinking water, folding a blanket. He tried to teach her a few words. Food, water, safe. She repeated them in her soft voice, struggling but trying. He didn't know her name, and she didn't ask for his. At night, she would wake suddenly, breathing hard, her eyes wide with fear. Jake heard her whisper strange words in the dark. He couldn't understand them, but he knew what fear looked like. Every time he stepped closer to calm her, she would flinch, then slowly relax when she saw his face. Outside, the forest was no longer peaceful. Jake noticed deep prints in the snow that didn't match any animal he knew. He also heard a low humming sound at night, far in the distance, like machines passing overhead. The sky sometimes flickered with strange blue light. Something was searching. One morning, she stood in front of the mirror. Jake was making tea when he saw her fingers touch the side of her stomach. Her face was calm, but her eyes looked sad. She turned to him and pointed to herself, then gently placed both hands on her belly. Jake stopped what he was doing. He walked closer and stared at her. She held his gaze and repeated the motion, hands over her stomach, eyes full of emotion. He finally understood. She was carrying a child. Jake stepped back, unsure, his mind filled with questions. Was the child human? Was it hers from before, the crash? Was it something else entirely? But she didn't speak. She just stood there, silent and still, waiting for him to react. He didn't know what to say. Later that day, while Jake was outside gathering more firewood, she picked up a pencil and slowly wrote something on a piece of paper. Her hand shook and the letters were not perfect, but the word was clear. Ilara. Her name. When Jake returned, she handed him the paper. He read the name out loud. She smiled for the first time. From that moment, something changed. Ilara began to trust him more. She started helping around the cabin. She tried to cook even though she didn't know how. She fixed small broken things with tools Jake didn't even remember owning. And when he showed her the stars at night, she quietly named a few. Her voice was gentle, filled with sadness and memory. One night, as the wind howled outside, Ilara sat close to the fire. She looked at Jake and spoke slowly, using the few English words she had learned. They left me, she said. I was not wanted. Jake sat beside her waiting. They said, I carry wrong child. Her voice broke. Jake's hands clenched. She continued, slowly, word by word. Her people believed she had broken a rule. A child made from a foreign body was dangerous to them, a mix of two worlds, of two species. She had escaped to save her unborn child, but the ones who were chasing her were not far behind. Jake now understood the danger. Whoever was looking for her wouldn't stop, and if they found her, they would kill her, and possibly the child as well. The strange lights in the sky, the footsteps in the snow, they weren't just random. Ilara was being hunted, but she had nowhere left to run. Jake looked at her again. She was no longer just a strange being from another world. She was someone carrying a life, someone abandoned, someone scared, and he had taken her in. Now he had a choice. Stay out of it, or protect her no matter the cost. He didn't need time to think. He stood, walked to the door and locked it. Then he grabbed the old hunting rifle from the wall. It was rusty, but it still worked. He looked back at her and said one word, safe. Ilara's eyes filled with tears, because for the first time since her crash, she believed him. A bond beyond worlds. Ilara's presence no longer felt like a mystery. She was now a part of Jake's quiet world. Her steps no longer echoed with hesitation. She moved through the cabin with ease, sometimes touching the windows like she was remembering stars she could no longer see. Jake had grown used to her quiet company, her watchful eyes, and the small smile she gave him each morning, even if her words were still few. But the air around them had changed. There was something unspoken growing between them, something more than trust, more than kindness. It was in the way Jake noticed her first, even before the fire when he returned inside. It was in the way she always left a cup of water near his seat before he could ask. There was no plan for it, no name, but it was real. The child she carried had made the silence deeper, not heavier. Jake didn't ask how it was possible. He only knew what she had already shown him, that the child was not accepted by her kind, and that danger still followed her. She didn't cry. She didn't complain. She just lived each day with a calm strength that Jake had come to admire. Ilara began learning faster now. Her words were clearer. She listened closely to how Jake spoke, repeating his sentences softly, to herself. She had trouble with some sounds, but she laughed when she got them wrong. It was the first time Jake had heard her laugh, and it stayed in his mind long after the sound faded. He showed her the map once, an old one, with worn-out folds. She didn't care about the towns or the roads. She pointed to the sky, then back to herself. She said, "Home, far." Then she looked at him and added, "Can't go." Jake nodded. He knew she was not lost. She had been left. And yet she didn't seem bitter. She was focused on life now, on the child, on learning how to survive here. She had started asking small questions too. "What is this?" she'd say while touching a coat. "Why wood burn?" she'd ask while watching the fire. "Do all humans live alone?" she once asked, quietly, almost afraid of the answer. "No," Jake had said. "Most don't. I just chose this." She thought about that, then said, "Now, you not alone." Jake couldn't reply. Her words hit deeper than he expected. One morning, while preparing breakfast, Jake saw her standing near the doorway looking out into the woods. Her body was still, but her shoulders were tight. Something wasn't right. "Ilara?" he said. She didn't turn. Then she spoke in a low voice. "They are close." Jake didn't ask how she knew. He didn't need to. He trusted her now. Not just her words, but her instincts. That night, he checked the cabin's locks twice. He loaded the rifle. He moved supplies to the back room and kept the lights dim. Ilara stayed near him, not in fear, but in silence, like someone waiting for a storm that hadn't yet arrived. Later, as the wind blew outside, Ilara reached out and took his hand. Her fingers were cold, but her grip was sure. She looked into his eyes and spoke one word: safe. She wasn't asking. She was promising. Jake didn't know what to feel. She had nothing to offer him. No protection, no weapons, no answers. And yet, in that one word, she had given him something more powerful than all those things. She had given him purpose. He was no longer just a man hiding in the woods. He was someone she trusted, someone she needed, and that changed everything. The child she carried, the danger that followed, the silence between them. All of it was no longer just her burden. The truth of her race. The snow outside had begun to melt, but the weight inside. The cabin grew heavier with each passing day. Jake had noticed that Ilara's glow was different now, more focused, more alive. Her hands rested on her stomach often, her fingers drawing slow circles over the same spot. The child was growing, and something about it made the air in the room feel charged, like a storm was waiting just beyond the trees. Ilara spoke more now. Her voice was still soft, but it no longer shook. She asked about human history, about families, about how people lived together. Jake answered the best he could, keeping things simple, but it was clear her questions came from a place of deep sadness. She had never known what it was like to be loved in a world that wanted her gone. One night, without warning, She began to speak of her people. They live by code, she said. Everything must follow rules. Blood must stay clean. Birth must be controlled. Love is not chosen. Jake listened without interrupting. Her words came slowly, sometimes breaking in the middle, but her eyes stayed steady. I was selected, she said. Not to choose, only to obey, but I didn't. Her voice was steady, but her hands tightened into fists. I saw your kind, your strength, your kindness, your chaos. I wanted that for my child. A child born from will, not order. Jake didn't move. He understood what she meant, even if she didn't say it outright. Her child was not the result of a cold decision from a genetic match. It was a choice, a rebellion, and she had paid the price. They called it wrong, she whispered. A child mixed with human life. They said it would be unstable, dangerous, unclean. Jake felt anger rise inside him. Not just for her, but for the unborn child. A life unwanted before it had even begun. Not because of who it was, but because of what. Is the child okay? He asked. Ilara nodded slowly. Stronger than they thought, growing fast, feeling everything. There was silence then. Jake looked at her stomach. He thought of what that meant, of a child born from two worlds that were never meant to mix. Would the galaxy see this child as a threat or as a miracle? Ilara stood and walked to the window. Outside, the sky was dark, but she stared at it like it still held pieces of her past. They will come, she said. They will not stop. Jake already knew that. He had seen the lights in the sky, the broken branches, the strange machines in the woods. They had been waiting, watching. What will they do? He asked. Ilara turned to him, her expression flat. Take me. Kill the child. Erase the proof. Jake clenched his jaw. Not while I'm breathing. A long silence followed. Ilara didn't argue. She simply walked over and placed a hand on his chest. You protect, she said, even without knowing why. I know now, Jake replied. That's enough. She nodded once. That night he brought out old gear, tools he hadn't touched in years. He strengthened the doors, checked every window, and laid quiet traps around the forest edge. It wouldn't stop everything, but it would buy time. And time was all they needed now. Jake wasn't a soldier. He wasn't trained, but something inside him had changed. Ilara had given him a reason to fight, not for Earth, not for revenge, but for something simple and sacred. A child, a woman who had been thrown away, and a second chance at building something no one else believed in. The night grew colder, but inside the cabin the fire burned stronger than before, and between them, without any words left to say, stood something unbreakable. Not armor, not weapons, but a bond, forged not by blood, but by choice. The hunt. Begin's morning arrived with a silence too perfect to trust. The birds were gone. The wind had stopped. Even the trees seemed still, as if they were waiting for something. Jake stepped outside and scanned the forest, his eyes sharp, senses alert. Something had shifted in the air, something unseen but close. Ilara stayed inside. She didn't need to be told. She felt it too. The peace they had built, quiet and fragile, was starting to crack. Jake had spotted strange marks on the snow the day before, deep, heavy prints that didn't belong to any animal. And last night, when the fire flickered low, he'd seen a blinking red light far off in the woods. It vanished before he could reach the door. They were here. He didn't know how many or how close, but he knew they were coming, the ones Ilara had warned him about. The ones who would stop at nothing to erase her and the child from existence. Jake had no advanced weapons, no team, no plan beyond instinct. But he had something the hunters didn't. Purpose. He moved quickly, using whatever tools he had. He strung wire across narrow paths, dug pits in the snow, reinforced the door with thick boards. He placed sharp tools and old traps in hidden spots, ready for anything. He knew it wouldn't stop them forever, but it would slow them down. And time. Just a little more of it was all Alara needed. Inside, she rested quietly, both hands over her stomach. The child within her was reacting. She had told Jake the baby felt things more than just touch or sound. It could sense fear, pain, love. And now it sensed the danger outside. Alara's eyes didn't show panic, only focus. "I will not run." "Again," she said. "I ran before. Not this time." Jake nodded. He didn't ask her to hide. She wouldn't, and neither would he. As the sun began to fall behind the trees, a strange hum filled the forest. It started low, like distant thunder, then grew louder, closer. Lights flickered between the trunks, soft at first, then sharp and white. Figures moved through the shadows, dressed in dark armor, faces hidden behind smooth metal. Not human. Not alien in a way Jake could describe either. Just cold, faceless, and perfect for what they were sent to do. Eliminate. Jake waited until they stepped into the first trap. A wire snapped, pulling one figure backward. Another fell into a hole and didn't rise, but the rest didn't slow down. They moved like machines, silent, fast, and without mercy. Jake fired once from behind the tree line. One went down, but the others spread out. Adapting quickly, he moved through the forest, staying low, drawing them away from the cabin. His heart raced, not from fear but from fire. This was his ground, his choice, and they would not take what mattered most. Back at the cabin, Alara stayed seated, her breaths steady but deep. The child was stirring. She closed her eyes and placed a hand on her chest. Jake had given her something no one else ever had, a chance. She would not let it be wasted. Then, without warning, the door shattered. Jake had returned too late. Two of them entered, moving like shadows. One reached toward her, but the moment his hand touched her skin, the glowing marks across her body lit up like fire. She screamed, not in pain, but in power. A pulse shot out from her, throwing both attackers against the walls. The lights in the cabin blinked. The fire roared. Her body glowed brighter than ever before, and the child inside her responded with a force she could barely hold back. Jake stormed in seconds later, breathless, gun raised, but it was already over. The two attackers lay still. Alara stood in, the center of the room shaking, her eyes glowing faint silver. "They are only scouts," she whispered. "The real ones will come now." Jake helped her sit. Her body trembled, not from fear, but from the energy rising within. She looked at him, tears forming in her eyes, not from pain but from something else. "I can't run anymore," she said. "And now, neither can you." Jake looked out the broken door into the dark woods. "I won't." Because now the hunt wasn't just for her, it was for everything they had built together, and for the future growing stronger inside her every hour. War for the child. The night brought no rest. Smoke still lingered in the air, and the sound of the broken door groaning in the wind reminded Jake of what had already begun. The scouts were only the beginning. What was coming next would be worse, faster, colder, and without hesitation. Alara could barely stand now. The child inside her was not only growing, it was preparing. She said very little, but her eyes revealed the pressure building inside her body. The glow beneath her skin no longer pulsed softly. It flared in waves, lighting the dark corners of the cabin. Whatever lived inside her was not ordinary. It was something new, something powerful, and it would be born soon, with or without safety. Jake had no time. He moved quickly through the ruins of what had once been his quiet life. He gathered everything he could: tools, fuel, scraps of old tech Alara had once repaired by instinct. In the forest, the traps were now useless. The enemy had learned. He needed more than wires and firewood. He turned to the strange metal object they had taken from the wrecked ship. Alara had told him to leave it alone, that it was too dangerous, but now, danger was already here. He pried it open, and inside he found pieces he didn't understand. Circular cores, glowing rods, unfamiliar metals that vibrated with heat. He didn't know what they were, but his hands moved with purpose, guided by something more than knowledge, by desperation. Hours passed, and then the sky opened. No longer quiet, no longer hidden. The enemy had arrived fully now. Their ship hovered low, a dark shape cutting through the clouds, its engines whispering death over the trees. The ground shook, lights danced between the branches like falling stars. They came without warning. Jake was ready. The first wave rushed the cabin, 3 of them, sleek and armored, weapons drawn. Jake hit the switch on the device he had built. A shockwave burst from the edge of the woods, throwing the attackers to the ground. They screamed, not from pain, but confusion. His trap didn't kill. It disrupted, gave him seconds, enough to move, enough to shoot, enough to fight. He moved like a shadow through the trees, protecting the small cabin as if it were a fortress. The wind cut across his face. The light from their ship turned the forest silver, but Jake kept going. Every moment they chased him was a moment Alara stayed safe. But safety never lasts. Back inside, Alara clutched the wall. Her breath came in short bursts. She could no longer hold the energy back. The child was coming. She fell to her knees, eyes glowing so bright that the walls reflected the light. She wasn't screaming. She was singing, soft in her language. A song of protection, a song of welcome. The birth had begun. The cabin door burst open again. This time Jake was too far to stop it. An elite figure stepped inside, taller than the rest, its armor carved with markings Alara knew too well. A leader, a judge, sent not to fight but to end. It raised a cold, gleaming weapon toward her. It didn't hesitate, but Alara raised her hand, and everything changed. A pulse of raw energy exploded outward, not from her but from the child. The enemy flew back through the air, crashing through the wall and vanishing into the trees. The cabin shook, the air turned hot, and in that moment, the child cried out, not with voice but with power. A heartbeat of light, a wave of force that echoed through the trees like thunder. Jake returned just in time to see it happen. Alara lay on the floor, cradling something in her arms. Her face was tired but calm. The child had arrived, not weak, not broken, but glowing softly with a silver light that pulsed with every tiny breath. Jake stood in the doorway, frozen. The battle outside had stopped. The skyship above turned silent, and slowly, one by one, the remaining enemies retreated, not out of fear, but out of awe. Because what they had called a mistake had become something else. A force neither side could fully understand. A child born from war, protected by love. And now, nothing in the galaxy would be the same again. A new family, a new world. The world had gone still again, but it was not the same silence as before. This time it wasn't empty. It was full of life, of breath, of quiet wonder. Inside the broken cabin, Alara sat wrapped in blankets, her body weak but her eyes clear. In her arms lay the child, small and glowing, its silver light casting soft waves across the wooden floor. The child did not cry. It didn't need to. Its presence alone was enough to speak to everything around it. Jake stood nearby, still and quiet. He had fought, bled, and nearly died for this moment, but now there was no anger left in him, only awe. The child had stopped a war before it even began. No weapons, no army, just light, just breath, just existence. Alara looked up at him. Her face was pale, but her expression was calm, peaceful, in a way he had never seen before. They felt it, she said, even before they saw. Jake understood. The child's birth had sent something out, a wave, a signal, something deeper than communication. It was a presence that touched not only flesh but memory, instinct, and fear. The attackers had vanished, not because they were defeated, but because they had no answer for what stood in front of them, something new, something beyond rules and borders. The sun rose over the forest, lighting up the snow-covered trees. Jake stepped outside, breathing in the cold morning air. The ship in the sky was gone, no more blinking lights, no more shadows moving between the branches. The forest was theirs again. But Jake knew this peace wouldn't last forever. Someone, somewhere, would hear of what had happened here, of a human man who protected an outcast alien, of a child born from two worlds that were never meant to mix, of a bond that grew stronger than fear. The galaxy would react, some with wonder, others with hate. But for now it didn't matter. Jake returned to the cabin and sat beside Alara. She looked tired but safe. The child reached out, tiny fingers glowing faintly, and touched Jake's hand. He didn't flinch. He smiled. No blood connected them. No law bound them. But still, something unbreakable had formed. A family born not of history or tradition, but of choice. Alara leaned her head on Jake's shoulder. "He will not be alone," she whispered. "No," Jake replied. "None of us will." The fire crackled gently in the hearth. Outside, the snow began to melt, not just from the sun, but from the warmth spreading through the cabin, from the life inside it. They had survived. They had changed everything, not through war, not through power, but through something even rarer: hope. And as the first birds returned to the sky, Jake held Alara's hand, the child between them, and knew without doubt this was only the beginning.